Now, over the weekend, it was reported that a Labour Party policy document suggested that it is considering nationwide low-traffic policies. If we're ever to come to power, a sort of national ULEZ, if you like, the scheme that charges you for using your own car on routine journeys, the Labour Party news website, Labour List, summarised the 86-page policy handbook which could help to form the party's manifesto, explaining its support for the principle of clean air zones. But perhaps this news has coincided, rather unfortunately for the Labour Party, with an unsurprising revelation. The Department of Transport has been unable to produce any evidence to support the idea that low traffic policies reduce the number of miles driven. The official responsible explained that there is no supporting evidence because, quote, low traffic neighbourhoods don't exist to reduce miles driven, unquote. As we all know, they merely exist to annoy motorists and find money for impoverished councils. The leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, was quizzed about ULEZ earlier today, and while he conceded that the charges were a lot of money, he deferred to the classic Sadiq Khan tactic, appealing to the emotion of his audience by referring to pollution-induced lung cancer, forgetting that the biggest problem of pollution was caused by Tony Blair, the EU and German car manufacturers encouraging the use of diesel rather than petrol engines. But I'm delighted to welcome back from the Green Party, Councillor Steve Masters. Steve, are you in favour of these ULEZ schemes, or do you agree with me they're just a means of bashing the motorist?
I think in principle that the requirement to have clean air zones is shown to be correct. You know, the impact of particulates on young lungs in particular, but also across multi-generations that induce respiratory problems. I mean, who wouldn't want their children to be able to walk to school in clean, fresh air rather than some of the choking roads that we recently experienced around London, for example?
I don't disagree with that, but I think the real scandal is the diesel scandal. That what happened was that the British people were told it was a good thing to buy diesel engines. Then these engines put out more nitrous oxides and particulates, which did have an effect on air quality. And now the self-same motorists who did what they were told are being penalised. And that just doesn't seem to me to be fair.
No, and it doesn't. And we shouldn't penalise, hard-working people who need cars to get around because there's an inadequate amount of public transport, outside London, for example. We need to see a modal shift across the country. And I don't know what the detail on the Labour policy document is about a national ULEV. I would imagine it will be in selected towns and cities which have particular problems. But we need that modal shift to active travel, public transportation. And not only does it reduce energy demand, which I think we all want to see less carbon emitted, but it will reduce congestion, and it will also allow space for communities and allow people to enjoy the parks and cycling and walking routes in that fresh air and less pollution.
But when you combine this with the low traffic zones, aren't you actually making things worse because you're forcing the traffic into a smaller number of roads, increasing the pollution on them and making journeys slower, which is when cars are most polluting? And that I think we may be getting to a dangerous level of agreement that we need a much more thoroughly thought through motoring policy.
If these policies are implemented in isolation and not without positive activities towards public transportation, people will remain in their cars if necessary. But we need to give people, as I mentioned last week at the end of our conversation, we need a joined-up, integrated transport policy that allows people to make those choices to get out of their cars.